So this is the second part of the focus on Persian impacts upon Judaism. And in this podcast, we're just going to look at the specific issues of demonology. So this is a very fascinating exploration of what took place among Jews in terms of how they thought about um, different beings that existed that were malevolent. And so some of this comes probably from their interaction with, the Persian culture. So with the demonology, we'll begin here by noticing that we do see an increased interest in the literature of Jews during this period in evil spirits. Um, there is little indication of demons, of what we typically think of demons, what we're familiar with of demons in the New Testament. There's very little indication of that in the Old Testament. So there's some scholarship that thinks that we may see something in a figure, something called Azazel, which is usually a scapegoat. But this name that occurs in the Old Testament, and the Shadim and Seraim, and there may be possible indications of worship of demons in Leviticus 17:7 and Deuteronomy 32:17. So there is some kind of hint that there may be something afoot, even in the pre-exilic um, Israelite faith, but it certainly is nothing compared, it's minor in comparison to what we see explode in amongst Jewish literature after they come back from Babylonian captivity. First Enoch, which is a source of the 2nd century and beyond. First Enoch is something that developed over a number of centuries. So you have to be careful with the information, but as early as the 2nd century BCE, we have First Enoch, who introduces readers to, or talks to its readers about watchers. And these watchers are interpreted as Genesis 6, 1 through 4's sons of God. And so the story there is about these sons of God who are celestial beings who have intercourse, sexual intercourse with women. And this is against God's order. And so the children of these women and these celestial beings are referred to as the Nephilims, or the giants. And so First Enoch interprets this to see them as fallen angels because they rebel against God. And the demons, their offsprings, are these demons who are the disembodied spirits of the giants. So we have the giants, then they are disembodied. They are these demons. So we see here First Enoch reflecting a tradition that would have existed probably before First Enoch was written about how to read Genesis 6, 1 through 4. So choosing one particular evil spirit that's quite popular, at least in the New Testament, is the figure of Satan, Satan. In the Old Testament, God doesn't really have an arch enemy who is constantly opposing his work. So that kind of narrative just doesn't exist in the Old Testament. God is supreme. Yes, there are these other beings, but they're all kind of in service to God. They all function under God's sovereignty. So they exist, but nobody is really challenging God. No spirit is challenging God. The Hasatan, who quite popular in the book of Job, so the book of Job opens this up, and in Zechariah, is a celestial being whose job is to accuse humans of sin. And so this is not someone who kind of lives or exists independent of God and tries just to frustrate whatever God is doing, but he's kind of in the court, this kind of celestial court, who comes and reports to God and gets permission from God to carry out certain things. So the sufferings that befall Job is part of what God wills. He allows it to happen. And so, Job's friends thinks it's because Job has sinned, but that is not the reason. So sometimes the righteous suffer at the hand of the accuser, here the Satan, who um, because they are being tested, not because they have actually done something wrong. However, we do see a weakness in Job, who begins to um, make accusations against God himself. So who is he to make these accusations against God? However, in the New Testament, a figure known as Satan or Beelzebub, which may be a derivative of kind of the Canaanite god Baal-zebub, um, which translates kind of Lord of the Flies. So we do have this Satan or Beelzebub who exists, and he is presented as someone who is opposing certainly what Jesus is doing. He stands against um, the proclamation of the gospel. He's seen as a really adversarial figure. So both in other places, maybe say, for instance, the book of James and in the book of Revelation. Now, in Paul has a different kind of nuance. Paul's view of Satan seems to be something more akin to Job, because when he talks about handing over certain believers to Satan to be punished, it's so that they might learn not to do the immoral, sinful thing that they are doing. So that's kind of confusing. Why would Satan cause a believer who is sinning to suffer? We would think, well, wouldn't he help this person who's rebelling prosper? Wouldn't he be on their side, not causing him to learn what it is he shouldn't do, he or she shouldn't do? So the figure of Satan is complex in the New Testament. The temptations and suffering of the righteous was at times in the literature, Second Temple Jewish literature, attributed to demonic, satanic activity. So, in other words, sometimes people suffer, the righteous suffer, not because they have sinned, which is what Deuteronomy says is why you are sometimes cursed and you sometimes have problems, or because of sin, people die, nor is it because you have acted unwisely, which is how the wisdom literature would present why people suffer, but because of these demonic spirits that exist who can cause the righteous to suffer in order to break them down, to get them to turn away from God. Evil spirits in the Second Temple Jewish literature is quite diverse. So we do have a prince of Persia. So in the reading in Thomasino, he seems to associate this prince of Persia, Daniel's prince of Persia, with a demonic activity. But I'm not so sure that's the case. The prince of Persia is not said to be demonic, but it is this spirit that is attached, as it were, to the nation of Persia. And so, yes, Michael has to fight with the prince of Persia, and so maybe that's what Thomasino means in terms of adversarial, or seeing it as Satan or demonic. But in Daniel, different nations, all nations have their own kind of guardian angel, or they all have an angel that's kind of associated with them. So Michael is the one associated with Judah, and there's this unnamed one associated with Persia. And so what's happening in the other world is kind of a reflection of what's happening on earth. And so if Michael is fighting with Persia, so there is this um, um, understanding that what's happening is God has come to Judah's rescue while it is under the sovereignty of Persia, and is seeking to change the circumstances from that Judah is under. And so it's not clear to me, at least, that the prince of Persia is demonic, but I do recognize that the prince of Persia contends with Michael. And so in that sense, it may be seen as adversarial. So saying something is adversarial and saying something is demonic. I'm just saying that we can probably make a distinction between those. The Book of Jubilees, so this is a very important Second Temple Jewish literature, calls God's opponents mastema, probably based off of a reading of Hosea 9:8, in which mastema is seen as a proper name. First Enoch, again, the devil is called Azazel, so this word that means scapegoat becomes a proper name of the adversary of God. And we also see in First Enoch this this thought about Azazel is a star that falls from heaven. So seeing this being as some kind of celestial being as fallen from their state, their position in heaven. And so I'll come back to that point in just a minute and how it plays into understanding of Satan. So this is kind of maybe a reading of Isaiah 14:12. And so, very oftentimes Christians grow up with a narrative about the fall of the devil, and they have this idea that the devil was once a good angel that becomes a bad angel. Well, and some of that is based off of the Isaiah 14:12 passage, or possibly even Revelation 12:9, or where Jesus says in Luke 10:18, I saw Satan fall from heaven. But these passages are not really about a celestial being, or at least with Isaiah, and it's not really about a celestial being who falls. The morning star that's mentioned in Isaiah 14:12 is a reference to Cyrus. It's not a reference to Satan. And he is using metaphorical language, figurative language, to talk about Cyrus. But of course, for Christians, what happened was, particularly in the Vulgate, Jerome's Vulgate, the Hebrew behind morning star gets translated as a proper name, kind of the same thing that First Enoch is doing and Jubilees is doing with words in the Hebrew. They think that authors are talking about a specific person, and so in Jerome's Latin Vulgate, the morning star is seen as Lucifer. So then we get this name, Lucifer, as the name for the devil, and comes the idea that Lucifer was this good angel who rebelled against God and then got kicked out. So that's off of a Christian tradition. It's not really taught in the New Testament. What Jesus is talking about in Luke 10:18 is seeing Satan's kingdom diminishing through the activity of Jesus' ministry, particularly casting out demons. That Jesus has this power and his disciples have this power to cast out demons, shows that Satan's losing his grip, as it were, on his kingdom, because his demons are being cast out of people. In other words, as if Satan has sent these demons into these people and he can't control what is happening. So Satan's kingdom is falling. It's a process that is happening. And so Revelation 12:9 also kind of picks up this kind of story of a fall of Satan. And so Revelation 12:9 is a little bit more trickier, especially as you read satanic activity that is being associated with Rome and the hope or the expectation that the author has of what will happen in the future with Rome's power. So all that to say is the Bible doesn't really teach that Satan was once a good angel who rebelled and became a bad angel. It doesn't really have an account of the origin of Satan. The Satan and Job and other places just exist. We don't know where they come from, and where the Satan figure who's in the Gospels and in other parts of the New Testament has been built up. It's a tradition that originates really out of this interaction between Judaism and Persia. So Finally, I'll just kind of conclude here with some other illustrations of evil spirits in the Second Temple Jewish literature. So we have the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, calls the opponents Beliar, and which is equal to the Belial, who is a figure, an opponent of God, who is in the Qumran material known as the community rule. And the Qumran community expected a future armed battle between humans and evil spirits. So I don't know exactly how you go to battle with physical weapons against evil spirits. That's a little bit kind of unclear to me how they envisioned that. But this battle is going to occur, but God is going to intervene in the battle because humans and evil spirits are kind of evilly matched, and so God is going to intervene and help the righteous out of this dilemma. So the idea of a future battle between evil forces and the righteous, that is found within Christian understanding or traditions as well. Even in Jesus' teaching, he talks about kind of the birth pangs of the Messiah. And he sees a time of kind of suffering, and these sufferings, are part of the reaction of the cosmos, including the angelic world or celestial beings world, at the incoming, the inbreaking of God's kingdom. And the same thing can be said is what is happening with the book of Revelation, anticipating this kind of great battle that is going to take place. So all that is kind of reflective of the apocalyptic mentality, and so in how evil spirits operate in that apocalyptic worldview. So that's just a little focus then on demonology and what seems to have developed after the time in which Jews were influenced by Persian culture and worldviews and mythology.